What is good, everyone, and welcome back to yet another video. Today we're talking Sony A7IV. Now, considering I don't actually have the camera in my possession and I haven't actually used it yet, I'm going to just go straight to the point, talk about the main features of the camera, what I think about it and what I like about the camera, what I don't like, and primarily who the camera is for, whether you should buy it or not, or it's something that you should be looking into if you are starting film, if you're starting photography. Is it a great all-round camera? So we've got full frame 33 megapixel, which is pretty decent for all you photographers out there. You'll be glad to know that they have added a flippy screen, thank the Lord. I don't know why it took Sony so long to add flip out screens into their mirrorless cameras. They were very late to the party. It has a 10-bit 422 video codec, again great for all the videographers out there. It does 4K 60 with a slight crop, which was something that I was a little disappointed in actually, because if it done 4K 60 full frame, I feel like people who are going from the A7 III, or maybe even considering buying this if you already have an A7S III, you're probably thinking like, why would I buy something with a crop when I've got something that does like 4K 120 full frame? So for anyone that has a Sony A7S III, I don't think that the video specs of this camera are gonna yet compete. Of course, it's not the Sony's video line camera, so you wouldn't expect it to, but again, 4K cropped, it's not the end of the world, but again, something myself as a creator probably would be a bit like, a bit iffy with, I would say. A few things that they've added onto the Sony A7IV which I really love is the quick switch dial to switch in between photo, video and S&Q mode. I feel like that will be a lot more sort of efficient. It has the same sensor as the Sony A1, which is a big dub. 5-axis in-body stabilization, and it's also priced reasonably well. Right here I'm looking at it, it's £2,399. So if you're in the US, I think that's $3,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's reasonably priced. It's like £1,000 cheaper than the A7S III, but obviously you've got the photography capabilities in this camera which you don't get in this A7S. But again, that's all down to what type of creator you are. If you're primarily a photographer, you don't really require all these like mad video specs. You don't have to like obviously spend the money and buy a Sony A7S, maybe go for an A7 III or an A7R4, because if you're a photographer, those are the sort of cameras you want to be looking at. Whereas if you're doing more video, you want to be looking towards the A7 III. A7S III, that's my go-to. I use that camera for pretty much everything I do in terms of video, but again, just got to be aware of the price point of these cameras. So extra 9 megapixel, having those sort of video capabilities is quite a step up from the A7 III, I will definitely say. The Sony A7IV has 15 stops of dynamic range, which is like 1 stop more than the Sony A7 III, I think. It shoots 10 frames per second, which is exactly the same as the Sony A7 III, so there's nothing new about that. Again, photo specs, having that 35 megapixel, it's a sweet spot in between like 50 megapixel, 24 megapixel, so it's a great in between. So the Sony A7IV shoots in 4K 24 FPS, 4K 30 FPS and 4K 60. Now the A7 III only shoots in 4K 24 and 4K 30, and this was something that I found quite challenging but actually benefited me when using the A7 III, because all of the videos that I wanted to shoot or I shot for my YouTube channel, I did not want to shoot in 1080 unless I was upscaling it to 120, and I absolutely had to. But majority, I would say about 90% of my life I was shooting in 4K 24 FPS, which didn't allow me to be sort of like a lazy filmmaker and just rely a lot on slow-mo. So I think that helped me out in the long run. But again, having that sort of peace of mind where you're going to have like 4K slow-mo is just a great thing, especially as a videographer myself. That's why I invested in the A7S III. The Sony A7IV shoots in 10-bit 422, which is the same as the Sony A7S III, and I think the Sony A7 III was 8-bit. So we've got a bit of an upgrade there. Because I'm used to shooting with the Sony A7S III, which shoots in 422 10-bit, the same as the Sony A7 IV, when I look at the footage from my Sony A7 III, which shoots in 8-bit, me being a picky videographer, I can notice a difference. It does start to fall apart, especially in like quite dark, low light situations. It does fall apart. So having that 10-bit color in my Sony A7S III gives me a lot more freedom when it comes down to color grading. I can really dial in those colors, and it doesn't fall apart. Whereas with the Sony A7 III, having like 8-bit, you can notice a difference. If you're a hardcore photographer there, if you're a hardcore videographer and you need video and high video specs in your jobs and what you do, having that like 10-bit is going to be a real big step up. The camera also allows you to shoot in S-Log A7III, which will give you around 15 stops of dynamic range. And it has a brand new H.265 codec. Best of all, which you'll all be glad to know, it shoots in S-Cinetone. Now this was something that I was quite frustrated with. I was like, oh, I really wish I could shoot in S-Cinetone on my A7 III. And then obviously Sony announced that they're gonna be putting S-Cinetone into the A7S III. And I was like, oh my goodness, all my prayers have been answered. This is gonna like save me so much time for if I wanna film a really quick video. I don't wanna sit there and just sort of grade it. It will save me so much export time if I just shoot everything in S-Cinetone and I can just edit it, stick it up on YouTube, and I don't have to spend ages grading it. Sony have also decided to take away that horrible micro HDMI and actually put a normal HDMI port in this camera, again, which was a beef that I had with the Sony A7 III. The amount of adapters that I went through with that camera, that was one sort of qualm I had with it. And I did mention this in my previous video about the A7 III. It was just like really frustrating because I would always break adapters with that mini HDMI. It was never secure. So the fact that they've added in a full HDMI port is going to be great. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Sony A7 IV is pretty much like the hybrid of the two Sony. So it's not going to have the best video specs as the A7S III will have, and it won't have the best photo specs as the Sony A7R series will have. It's an in-between. One feature that I know a lot of people are excited about with the A7 IV is a feature called focus mapping, which is basically zebras and peaking combined into one. That's the simplest way to put it. Like I mentioned before, they have upgraded the HDMI port, but we still have a mic jack, a headphone jack, and a USB-C, which is great because before it was a micro USB. Now everyone's sort of moving towards USB-C, so now you have a USB-C port in the camera, so you can actually charge it from the camera if you forget your battery charger, which I have done countless times. My final verdict: should you buy the Sony A7 IV? Now, personally, the price range of this camera I think is spot on. Anything more expensive I think would be like, no, I don't agree with that, but price range I think is very fair. Now, if you've already bought the Sony A7 III and you're sort of going more towards video things, I would say this camera is substantially better at video, whereas photo, you've got an extra 10 megapixel. Don't think, or 9 megapixel, I don't think you're going to tell that much of a difference. I think we have seen a lot of upgrades on this camera, and like I said, if you already have a Sony A7 III and you have basically used that to death and you are in the market for a new camera, then I would definitely consider upgrading. Whereas if you just bought a Sony A7 III and you kind of wanted to get started with video and you've started your career with this camera, I don't think there's anything wrong with the Sony A7 III or even sticking around with that camera for quite some time now. But then again, if you're thinking of upgrading, then this is a great option because there are, like I've said, a lot of substantial differences and a lot of substantial upgrades with the Sony A7 IV. There's been so much tech coming out, I actually can't keep up with it. Like yesterday, they had the DJI Ronin 4D, and then there's another 2 more DJI products coming out, and then we had the Sony A7 IV today. There's so many tech things coming out, I can't keep up with it. My brain's gonna fry. Anyway, that is it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like this video, don't forget to leave a like, rate, and subscribe. If you are new, follow me over on Instagram to be updated with all of my things and all the stuff that I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of traveling recently. I'm working on a very big project which will be out next week. So if you want to stay updated with all the things that I'm getting up to and all of my photos, follow me over on Instagram, and I shall see you all very, very soon in the next one.